Hey X, I'm an ex-private investigator who was asked to gather information on a cult south of Sydney, Australia. The things I discovered were definitely of interest to this board. If the thread gets interest, I'd be happy to accept questions. I can't confirm or deny if anything I experienced was factually supernatural, but I have strange experiences. Here's some background. Cult was allegedly responsible for a string of murders in the area in the 70s and 80s, went under many names, none of them official, worshipped or coveted a man from the ocean, gathered on days of intense thunderstorms in the sand dunes south of the Sydney city, potentially practiced pagan ocean god worship, which included blood sacrifice and orgies fueled by LSD. I'll Greentext my first encounter with them to start, I suppose. Arrived at an open day held at the beach, included a barbecue and some ball games. Seemed more like a youth group or church activity than a cult, but I suppose that's how they get you. One woman in particular, painted blue from face to waist, wearing a patterned blue skirt and bikini top, probably around 30 years old, white skin and natural redhead, clearly in charge of activities for the day. I immersed myself and signed in at a little folding table staffed by teenage girls, one of which had more piercings in her face than I could count. Pretty standard beach fare for most of the day. When the sun started setting, the weird shit began. 6 little open fires were lit in a line along the beach, just short of where the waves rolled in. Older staff started fire dancing and asked for newcomers to kneel in rows and call out to the water. I refused, said I wasn't comfortable kneeling. Blue Woman was very kind and understanding. Asked her for the purpose of the exercise, and she told me the ocean will come in and pull your negative energy away. After about 2 minutes of calling out, the fire dancers came through, asking for money donations while holding bowls and twirling their staves. I gave them $10 and the day started to come to an end. Shook hands and was invited to their next event 2 weeks away. I sat in my car and watched the organizers pack up. Blue Woman and 2 fire dancers started kissing a young woman all over her body. The woman shut off her clothes and swam into the water, disappearing into the night. As far as I could see, the rest of the staff left after she jumped in. I waited about an hour or so, and I never saw her come out. Was it possible she swam out to an island, or did she drown? It's literally the most eastern part of Australian land. There was no island she could have reached. I didn't see any watercraft she could have boarded. I couldn't be sure she drowned, but I had a decent vantage point, and she didn't come out for a long time. Or at all while I was there. Here's some links to some crimes apparently linked to the cult. I forgot to mention that lesbianism was rife amongst this cult. Almost every woman I spoke to in this organization identified as lesbian. What made you spooked with this story? So far it seems very common pagan stuff, except for the girl disappearing in the sea. Well, the genuinely spooky stuff happened on the 3rd event I attended, but I'll go over the 2nd event for context. Attended a meeting at a small bar above a bakery not too far from the beach. Drinking and chit-chat ensues. I drink soda water with lime as to keep a clear head but appear to be partaking. Blue Woman is in attendance, and the girl with the piercings, but everyone else is a new face. Blue Woman is not blue this time. Older man with a goatee and long blonde hair, clearly in charge of things. Get chatting to him. Turns out he's around 60 years old, but doesn't look it. Shoot the shit about surfing and how he likes to surf during thunderstorms. Eventually, tells me about the man from the ocean, detailed in my earlier post. Keep an eye out for the swimming girl. She never turns up. Really want to ask about her, but didn't want to arouse suspicion, so I kept my mouth shut. Eventually, the older man, let's call him Dave, addresses the table after a few hours of light drinking and chit-chat. It's good to see new faces here who appreciate the ocean and beach spiritually, etc. A new housing development is being proposed for construction, native habitat being bulldozed, sacred ground, blah blah blah. I tell them how I too am against its construction, which is bullshit, but hey, when in Rome. After everyone is leaving, he tells me about another meeting I might be interested in. Calls it a storm ceremony. Tell him I'm not really into spiritual things like that. Tells me I can't miss it. It will be, and I quote, sensational. Agreed to go to the ceremony, which was scheduled on the coming Saturday's evening during a thunderstorm, in the sand dunes where the Wanda Beach murders took place. Mentioned safety issues of being in an elevated open space during a thunderstorm. Dave laughs it off, says if you respect the ocean, it will never turn its back on you. Wonder what it had to do with the ocean, and head home. The 3rd and final time I attended one of these organizations' meetings was a night I will remember forever. parked my car about 9 p.m. on a Saturday night in a communal parking lot near the entrance to Wanda Beach sand dunes. It would take about 30 minutes to hike to dunes where the ceremony was set to take place. Brought a torch, a heavy raincoat, and a Swiss Army knife, as well as my phone and wallet, obviously. Rain started to set in during my hike, put the hood on my coat and trudged forward. Eventually, the rain was torrential, and rolling thunder could be heard constantly. Lightning strikes lit up the horizon over the ocean. In a valley between sand dunes, I could see a group, 5 people, all in raincoats, except for one guy. As I got closer, the guy was Dave, who was wearing board shorts and a singlet. "So happy to see you. Nice weather we're having. Wouldn't be much of a storm ceremony without a storm, would it?" We laugh a little, and I look around. Blue Girl is here, and 3 other women whom I've never met. We walk and talk for about 15 minutes, and we arrive in a strange valley. I immediately take note of a small sailboat sitting upside down on some wooden blocks up against a bush. I ask Dave what we're doing here. Dave tells me we're protesting the housing development. Tell him it's a pretty shitty protest if nobody will see us, and he laughs it off. Eventually, the rain dies off to a little drizzle, and Dave pulls some wood and newspaper out of the boat and tries to get a fire going. There's a bunch of log stools around an established fire pit not too far from the boat, he shows us. Blue Girl squirts lighter fluid into the fire pit, and the 2 of them get a fire going after about 30 minutes with the rain mostly subsided. Sit down on a log stool, and Dave offers me a beer from his backpack. Crack the beer and make small talk with one of the girls. She tells me this is her second storm ceremony, and the last one was amazing. After about an hour, the conversation gets more giggly and incoherent, and I try to match their energy. I realize that everybody's pupils are unnaturally large, and feel a lump in the pit of my stomach when I come to the conclusion they've taken acid. Conversation devolves into straight up gibberish and uproarious laughter. Ponder whether my beer was spiked, but I feel completely normal, albeit anxious. Dave asks Blue Girl to show me her breast, wheezing with laughter. She takes off her t-shirt. Dave points at her and grins at me suggestively. Laugh along and try to seem cool with everything when I was really starting to stress out. The other girls start taking off their clothes, and Dave takes off his top and starts howling as they do it. Not so much animal howling, more like frat boy howling. He's laughing hysterically and clapping his hands as the girls dance around. I'm the only one that hasn't left my seat. Eventually, Dave whispers into Blue Girl's ear, looking at me, and Blue Girl comes and kneels in front of me. She places her hand on my leg and says, and I quote, "Do I look fuckable to you?" Starts rubbing my leg up and down, and I try to laugh off her question. Dave eventually stops laughing and says, "Does she?" The mood completely shifts, and everyone is staring at me intensely. The 2 other girls are visibly frightened and are whispering to each other. I stammer and manage to respond, "I'm not really interested actually," or something to that effect. Dave's expression grows cold and angry. He simply states, "Swim." Blue Girl grips onto my pants and starts saying, "Swim," with a big grin on her face, giggling a little. I stand up and she lets go. "I think I'm gonna leave, mate." Dave storms towards me and pushes the Blue Girl out of the way. She cowers from him. He gets right in my face and says, "You wanna get far, mate?" pointing towards the boat. I push him away from me and tell him to fuck off, backing away. Blue Girl clings to his leg, and he gestures with his arms as if to instigate a group hug with the other girls. I start walking away as they all hug him, and he incessantly says, "You won't get far. Not gonna get far, mate," etc. After I get out of the valley, I move briskly and keep looking over my shoulder. Hate to admit it, but I was fucking terrified. Eventually, I could see from the top of the sand dunes down into the valley and spotted the campfire light. At least 20 people were standing around the fire. I heard some noise coming from further up the path, so I slinked into the bush and laid on my stomach amongst some scrub, trying to make myself as small as possible. 3 young men came through, all shirtless, carrying other young men who appeared to be unconscious. They were speaking very loudly, and I heard one of them say to tell Dave this one doesn't swim. Wait 10 minutes or so for them to pass and get up, practically running at this point. I'm not that far from the car park when the storm really sets in. Eventually, loud thunder, torrential rain, and frequent lightning. I get to my car and drive the fuck out of there. Call the police on the way. Say I saw some people out there while walking my dog. Receive a call the next day from the police. They didn't find anything, and was probably just some teenagers. Tell my clients I'm discontinuing the assignment and give them a substantial discount. Went back to uni about 3 months later. Tell me about their deity. Deity was only named once to me at the second meeting I attended. Older member called it the man from the ocean. He explained it was more of a symbol, a native fisherman that comes out from the ocean and collects your negative emotions and carries them into the sea. I played along for the most part, but the old guy insisted you could physically see and interact with the man if you paid attention. I wonder what they meant by swim. I presume it's code for something, but I imagine it still has something to do with water. Did you ever see any of those people again after this? No, I never did. It's strange though, people exercise in these sand dunes during the day all the time, and nobody knows anything about these people. Stranger still is that they don't hold events in my area under the same name anymore. Nobody knows anything about these people. How did you find them the first time then? How were you invited? Let me rephrase. Nobody knows anything about the people there that night. People are aware of the organization though. I was pointed in the direction of the beach that day by my client. The event was open to the public. What were you investigating for the client? The client suspected their daughter was involved in the cult activities and had seized contact with my client. They had an argument about the cult on the phone and she ghosted my client for a couple of months. Police said she wasn't technically missing and couldn't help, which is pretty typical.